You are listening to the What a Word podcast, an interview style podcast where guests bring their unique experiences and insight on culture, life's challenges, and faith. Each episode is seasoned with words which will inspire and encourage. Now, here is your host, Ryan Sharp.
Welcome to the What a Word podcast. I'm honored to be joined by my good friend, Sean Farrow. I like to say Sean is every attorney's favorite attorney. I can't tell you how many times I've called Sean when I've had contested matters, had to do voir dire, which is our introduction to juries, and I wanted to bounce themes and topics off someone. He's a good friend of mine. We met a number of years at a trial academy. And Sean's journey has been interesting. He's now a solo practitioner. He was on the podcast a number of years ago. And at that time, he had recently come off a huge acquittal of someone charged with attempted murder. He's worked as a public defender. He's worked in a variety of capacities. And he now has his own firm, which we'll talk about as we engage and do some catching up. We've also decided to touch on a book that's very important to both of us. It's great to have my friend with us. Please join me in welcoming Sean Farrow to the What a Word podcast. Welcome, my friend.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to connect with you again and see you.
Yeah, man. Listen, I'm so happy for everything that's happened. I was telling Sean a few minutes ago that I saw his firm name come up. We have a listserv where attorneys share ideas, they share cases there, and someone needed help on a court matter. And I saw Sean offer to cover the case for that person. I thought there can be more than one Sean Farrow in New York City doing criminal defense work. And I'm so happy to hear about your journey. What led you into private practice?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. One, being a public defender, I love it, and that will always be my heart and soul, but there's just not enough money there, right? And the cost of living in New York City keeps going up. So I had to make a financial decision. Unfortunately, I got forced to do that by the city and where I choose to live and where I choose to practice. I think the other practical reality is when you work as a public defender, there's only so much you can do in terms of helping people. When you take on private matters, you get to be a little bit more selective in the cases that you choose. And some of those cases can really kick open the doors to helping more people that come behind you. So, for instance, whether it's a criminal case that you can actually put the time in terms of challenging it, in terms of doing the hearings and doing the trials, or whether it's class action cases or multiple plaintiff cases on the civil side, you have this I guess breadth of ability, if you will, to be able to help more people at a time where, as public defender, you're limited by what comes through the basket, so to speak, what's on the top. So that's it. And I wanted to be able to help more people because at the end of the day, we're in this business, yeah, to make money, but for me, we're here to help people. That's why I wanted to do it. So private practice has afforded me that opportunity to help more people and really make a name for myself and also fight for justice.
Wow, your story is compelling to me because you and I spoke about just how competitive it is to get into legal defense work. Even as a public defender or legal aid, many people have no idea how competitive that is. But you spoke about working, I believe it was with Bronx Legal Aid,
Yes.
and just the hoops you had to go through to land a job. Could you share with our listeners who have no idea just how competitive it is to get a job as someone in legal aid or as a public defender in another office?
Yeah, New York City is, one of those markets, right? People want to come here and people want to work. And there could be a number of reasons for any person as to why they want to come here. But I think the number one reason that we kind of all share is we like the competition. We all kind of want the smoke. So you come to New York City because you know you're against, the best minds, the best talent, and you want to test yourself against that. And to get that position, which I think is still an honor to this day, and I think for the rest of my life I will. That was a challenge because even though I was an intern and I was intern for 2 of my 3 years of law school, I still had to do multiple rounds of interviews. I still had to work the back channels. I still had to talk to the head of the different offices, the head of the criminal defense practice, and I still barely got in. I have other, interns over the years that have worked for me who, I put in a good word and I've tried to use my connections, but because it's so competitive, they got waitlisted. It is one of those things where you would love to get everybody through the door, but you just can't. There's only a select number of spots, and everybody's vying for those select number of spots. But New York City, I mean, if you're going to be a lawyer, this is the place you want to practice, especially if you're going to do criminal defense, right? You're going against some of the best on the DA side. You want to test yourself. You want to test those skills, and you want to see what you're made of. So yeah, it was hard, but man, I'm lucky I got in the door, and I think I kicked the door open for myself and showed what I can do.
What was the population like when you were applying? What was the demographic of the clients? And if you don't mind sharing, what was the demographic of the attorneys who you were going up against or who were already working in the firm?
Sure. So population, I mean, we have 5 boroughs. Staten Island's a little bit of a misnomer because Staten Island is got more white brothers and sisters out there. But nevertheless, when you look at all 5 boroughs, you're looking at probably the majority are black for sure. If I had to put a percentage, I don't know what that is, but if I had to put a percentage based on my practice, I put somewhere in the 60% range is probably black. The next biggest is probably Hispanic, somewhere in the like 20 to 30% range. Then I probably would put white, and then I'd probably put Asian. Middle Eastern kind of falls within between white and Asian. And then when you look at the attorneys, and this was kind of the frustration that, myself and other attorneys had then, and I'm sure that they still have now, it's not reflective of the people who are being brought through the system. Most of the attorneys, probably like 80% are white. It kind of reminds me, I love sports, and it's kind of reflective of what we see in the NFL, right? Most of the people working are of color, right? 70% of the league is black, but the coaches, the coaching staffs, the front offices, certainly the owners, it's all white. That is a symptom that we have in America that we don't address. And until we address it, until we confront it, we can't begin to change it, where you just don't have enough people getting through the doors who can make decisions or could do this higher level thinking, but instead are relegated positions of like support staff. And there's no knock on that, but there's a lot of talented brothers and sisters who should be the lawyers, even at legal aid, should be at the private firms. And instead, it's either support staff or the clientele. That is a real issue. If we're going to be representing these people, and most importantly, in representation, what does that mean? We're telling their stories. Then the people telling their stories should kind of look like them because they're the best ones to understand that story and be able to communicate that story. I'm sorry to kind of go on a little bit, but what is interesting is just this notion that our clients are telling a story, and the best messengers are people who have never walked a day in their shoes. We've been code switching, as we like to say, but translating our entire lives. We've been speaking multiple languages our entire lives. So wouldn't we be in the best position to kind of communicate what's going on and what happened to the judges and opposing counsel when we have been doing this our whole life and we understand not only what to say, but how to say it? So yeah, it's a little bit frustrating. That's kind of the demographic where it's 80% white, and then the other side is 70% black. Kind of interesting.
Oh man. And it's understated the skepticism that clients, and we could say reasonably, have about the representation they get from people who look like them. And it's not for a lack of trying or a lack of effort, but I've had more than a few clients say to me, Mr. Sharp, I don't think I'll get a fair share in the court because you're the only person who looks like me in the court. The judge doesn't look like me. The DA doesn't look like me. Probation, who chimes in, the officer doesn't look like me. You're the only one who looks like me. So, notwithstanding your best effort, I think the odds are stacked against me. We have that skepticism too from clients because of what you described earlier, the numbers just don't align with the demographics.
Sure. And look, that is definitely frustrating. And I've experienced that as well, where you have that skepticism, right? And sometimes I've had clients say directly, I want a white lawyer. I want a Jewish lawyer. I've had that multiple times, especially in my young career. And I get it, right? The system has been set up such that this is their way of thinking, right? They've been conditioned to think that way. And you have some attorneys, white, black, or indifferent, who are going to fight for them and who want to fight for them. And it is frustrating to kind of have to break down that wall. But I do think that is a responsibility that is inherent upon the position that we take. When you sign up for this is part of what you sign up for, right? And so you should be trying to fight and to break down that conditioning and that way of thinking. I mean, put the client to the side for just a moment. Isn't that what we're doing to judges? Isn't that what we're doing to opposing counsel? Isn't that what we're doing to the juries? We know they come in with preconceived notions. I mean, every trial, we got to do an opening and closing charge on bias. That tells you everything you need to know about how the system is set up. So, what difference does it make if you have to do the same thing to your client? If anything, I should be encouraged that I have this opportunity because it is an opportunity to change my client's perspective. And I can leave a lasting impression that not only do we belong here as attorneys, but we're damn good too. We're damn good. So, yeah, I want to change hearts and minds. That's why I'm here as a Black attorney. I get to make money and I get to change hearts and minds. I'm not going to always do it. I'm not going to always be successful. That's just the reality of the game we play. But I look at it as an opportunity to have that position to persuade. And if it means I got to do it to my client, in addition to the judge, the jury, and the DA, so be it. That's what we're here for. And let's stop shying away from it. Because shying away is kind of how we got Trump 2.0. But we'll talk about that another time.
Man, listen, I and Sean and I spoke offline. I was talking about the maturation process. We were talking about Sean and I, Malcolm X, James Baldwin, and a few of our writers who spoke truth to power in the 60s and how relevant those writings are even now. And I was asking Sean in our discussion earlier whether Malcolm X, because Malcolm X is who inspired me to go to law school. I read his autobiography in high school and I was like, there you go. Malcolm thought advocacy and the work of attorneys could help to topple or stem the tide of white supremacy. He actually believed we could be impactful doing the work through the legal system. But I often wonder, and I threw it out to Sean, if where we are now, if the discussions and the scholarship on where we are now would have been a part of Malcolm's maturation process had he had the opportunity to live to see this ripe age in 2024, 2026. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's no question, but that what we discussed today in today's world would have been part of his maturation process. However, and it's like saying that Biggie, however, I stay coochie down to the side. However, I don't know if we're in this position with a Malcolm, right? And I'm going to also throw in Fred Hampton there because I believe that both of them were assassinated for the same reason, their ability to bring people together and create a united front, right? What did J. Edgar Hoover say? We got to stop the rise of a Black Messiah. Both of them were Black Messiahs, right? There's power within that. So I wonder if we even are in this position and we need to have at least these type of conversations. We'll have conversations. I just think they might be different because I think we'd be a lot further along the timeline. And I don't think that's wishful thinking. I think that's what Malcolm and Fred were both doing so well. And I think that their ability, as we were talking offline, to master rhetoric was their superpower in bringing us all together and moving us forward. So, yeah, I think there's no question these ideas and maybe others would have been part of Malcolm's maturation. But at the same time, I'm not sure we're stuck in this place. I'm not sure that we have gone backwards if Malcolm's still alive, because Malcolm was full steam ahead moving forward, especially once he came back from Mecca. Oh, you couldn't stop Malcolm then. That's why they had to put a bullet in him. There was no stopping him. So I'd like to think that we would be a little further ahead than where we were before. But now we need
Powerful,
a new
man.
Malcolm.
Powerful, powerful. So, I touched base with Sean and I said, Sean, there's this book I've not had the opportunity to discuss with you yet. I think both he and I have read it a few times. The
Yeah.
New Jim Crow Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander.
Mhm.
It's a book that touches on so many important themes, and I wanted Sean's take on a few themes that came up in the book. I think one we both experienced as defense attorneys, the um, the movement of bodies of young Black and brown people for nonviolent criminal offenses. Uh, we've seen them ushered into an incarceration or criminal justice system that's forever labeled them. And Michelle Alexander says that there is a face that this movement needed to be validated. Do you want to share on Alexander's take on the shackling of Black and brown bodies and ushering them into what she now considers the new Jim Crow?
Yeah, Michelle talks about some, or Miss Alexander, she talks about something very poignant at the beginning of the book. And I was listening to the audiobook on my way back into the city this morning. And she quoted Brian Stevenson, the great and Hall of Fame lawyer that Brian Stevenson is, and how he talked about, slavery never ended, it just evolved. And I used that as a point of reference to look at the entire book, The New Jim Crow, because the book title itself is basically implicitly saying how it evolved. And in today's world, what we have seen is an evolution of what has happened in the past. What strikes me, and I'll get back to the evolution in just a moment, is how our brothers and sisters, namely our white brothers and sisters, have responded and reacted to this evolution. How they are shocked and awed and appalled by these atrocities that are being committed by the government, when we have been saying to them in every form possible, in every media possible, from books to movies to TV shows to magazine print to speeches, political speeches, speeches at award ceremony, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Colin Kaepernick, not too long ago. We have been saying these things at nauseum, and it just seems to have fallen on deaf ears. And now they're just like, I can't believe we did this. What do you mean you can't believe? We've been doing this since we came here, and we've been telling you. But putting that aside, what we have done with mass incarceration is we've taken the black codes of yesterday and we've evolved them, and we give them different names and different justifications, but it still gets to the same end result. As I was coming from DC this morning, and I'll give you an example, back into the city, I was thinking about marijuana, how that is still illegal in states. And it got me thinking, because we just had the opioid crisis. Bunch of white people. And what was struck me, and why that even popped into my mind, is because as I was walking around DC this weekend, just as a quick getaway, I passed by the Asian Art Museum. Seckler is on the name of the museum. Seckler family, the family at the head of the opioid crisis, who did nothing but paid a speeding ticket, even though they devastated and wreaked havoc on tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of families across the country, destroyed communities. Nobody goes to jail. You want to smoke weed, you got to go to jail. So we have one drug that makes people chill, right? All my years of practice, we've been practicing a decade. I ain't seen one client yet come through with an assault or violent charge, or murder charge, or rape charge off of weed. Not one yet. I ain't seen no crazy accident because someone smoked weed. I ain't seen nothing bad happen because someone possessed or smokes weed other than them getting arrested and in prison. That doesn't make sense, but that's a black code because that is directed towards us. That is targeting us, and to a lesser extent, but at the same time, an equal extent, our brown brothers and sisters. So these shackles that we used to literally have on our feet to keep us from running away, that has evolved into an ankle monitor. The shackles that kept us tied together, that has now evolved. And now it is this program or that program. It is now parole or probation, right? It's not enough that you did your sentence. Now we have to put you on parole or probation. And listen, let me not get it twisted, right? I am someone who will speak up day after day. There is a reason why jail exists. I have had some clients that until we figure out something else to do, jail might be the best option. And I understand that some clients, again, we don't know what to do with them. Maybe probation, parole might be the right fit, but too often that is the answer. Too often we are too quick to go that route. And so while there are exceptions to that rule, as I just mentioned, the rule is problematic within itself because we are evolving what we used to do into a more modern sense and saying that this is progress. This isn't progress. This is degradation. This is humiliation. This is so problematic because it is just stifling progress, and it's crippling our communities.
Powerful, man. You know, when you started off, you highlighted something Michelle also said. She says rather in her book that white indifference. When you talk about what we've been saying for years, if black young men had been going off, and I'm taking a quote from her and summarizing it, if black young men had been going off to colleges in high numbers at the same rates that white young men were heading off to prison, she said we would have nothing short of a revolution in this country because people would not accept those numbers.
You know, it's funny you say that because the reason why I went to DC is because I've been wanting to check out the African American Museum. And if people haven't checked that out, whoa, 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 whoa. That museum, man, my heart came away so full, and I am so proud of us. I'm proud of even just this conversation from where our people started from to where we are and where we're headed. Amazing. But I say that to say, like, I, I agree with Miss Alexander, but I might tweak it just a little bit. Like, I can't even imagine if we went to college in the same numbers as white people and what that would mean. A revolution is an understatement. And the reason why I say that is because, as we just alluded to, Brother Malcolm and Fred Hampton, and there's so many more, we were going to have, and we were on the precipice of having revolutions. And quite arguably, at times we had revolutions. And that's without all the brothers and sisters going to college. If we go to college, and this is what I think is the real fear from white people, this is what I think the real motive of white replacement theory is. They know that if we come together, they know that if we have leaders, if we are educated, not only would it be a revolution to upend all the years of hatred and animosity and prejudice, we would be in power. And we would be in power across the board. And I think the very real fear is that they know what they've done. And if we're in power, they fear what we would do to them if we're in power, right? We all know that. But most importantly, they know that. I think a revolution would be an understatement because when I went through that museum and they intentionally start you off at the bottom, the basement, kind of looks like the hull of a slave ship. And when you finish legitimately at the top. What we've been able to do in this country, given all the obstacles that are in our way, all the policies and laws that directly and intentionally hinder us. Imagine what we could do if we didn't have half of those. Forget it. If we didn't have a quarter of those. Yeah, I think that's white America's biggest nightmare, both the conservatives, but I also think our liberal brothers and sisters.
Sean, if you could,
Mhm.
for many of my listeners and viewers who are unaware of the history of Jim Crow itself, we understand Jim Crow to be a labeling of a specific group or class of people, Black people, and
Yeah.
regulating them to a certain social status
Mhm.
based on race. How do we compare and contrast the new Jim Crow as Michelle Alexander illustrates it in her book?
So, what I want people to understand is that e- everything is a step by step process, right? And so, before I can dive into that, I want people to take a step back and realize that the ushering in or the renaming or reimagining of Jim Crow into the new Jim Crow is a step by step process. And so, right now, what we see in the new Jim Crow is okay, no more DEI, right? No more affirmative action, no more quote unquote advantages. And they weren't advantages, they were our attempts at trying to equal the unfair playing field. So it starts with that. But then after that, right, the next steps to come is what I think is what we're used to in terms of Jim Crow, which is we will find different insidious ways in which we can say racist things and discriminatory things without saying racist things, without being discriminatory, right? Uh, that's what we see in terms of dog whistles, right? We hear that a lot from the right. We hear that a lot from Fox News, and then there's many more outlets as well. But you hear those things, and what it ultimately does is it finds a way to relegate us back to second class citizenry, right? But what that does, I want to keep going a step further, is we're finding that our government and those that support the government in power are trying to find different ways to make us have a lack of self worth and a lack of self pride, because that's what Jim Crow is. It's not enough to just segregate, right? It's what segregation does to the person within. The new Jim Crow is evolving in a way that is trying to mimic the ways of the past, but rebrand it in a way that is more palatable to people, right? So the DEI hire, that is a way to kind of strip the power away from us and make us feel like we're less than. And once they plant that poisonous seed in people's mind, it makes people question whether that person is actually qualified or are they the DEI hire. And if you get rid of them, then so be it. We're just trying to be fair, right? So I see it in a number of ways. There's so many to list. That's just one of many examples. But every time you read a news article, every time you turn on the TV, every time you look at a social media post, half of what you see, right, is depending on your feed, your algorithm feed, half of what you see is a way to kind of circumvent us and make it seem like we are unqualified again for any position that involves any type of high skill or higher level of thinking. So, yeah, we see it.
Powerful, Sean. And we spoke about some of our heroes, and you touched on Dr. King. Dr. King, in his later years, he had tapped into the similarities between the life experiences of poor whites and Black folk in a way that made the government nervous. Because here you had a man saying, if in essence, if I were to close my eyes and hear about your experience, you have a different color, yes, but your experience and your aspirations are the same as mine, and your challenges are the same as mine. So, how about this Poor People's Campaign, where we unite and we look at the larger structural and systemic issues? And it seemed that Michelle Alexander would posit that that was perhaps where we were getting before this new idea that we needed to have this war on drugs, when in fact, drug use and drug crimes were descending, but they needed a new face and a new attack to create this new system, this racial caste system, in other words. How did we get here? Is why do just based on what I've said, when we had this opportunity to unite on issues that were common to all races, regardless of skin color, how did white poor people become comfortable with this notion that Black folk needed to be the face of this new war on drugs? Where did that indifference and that hostility come from? And was it new? Was it a new thing, or has history shown this time and time again?
No, that's the other thing people got to peep game to, right? So in America, look, the world is set up in a caste system, no matter where you go. In America, it's race. But you go to another country, it's religion. You go to another country, it is ethnic group. You go to another country, it's this, right? Like there's always some discriminatory practices that are going to be in place in any given place between the haves and haves nots. It's always an idea of how do you separate them. Look, how did we get here? It's because, and I don't think this is unique to our country. I think we just perfected it. At the end of the day, I think we really enjoy the idea of slavery. I think that countries really do. And I think people may not want to hear that, it may be uncomfortable, but when you start to peel back the layers, what are we really getting at here? We're getting at a bunch of haves who want to subjugate another group of people, and they have to figure out a way to subjugate them. Well, if they get together, because there's always going to be more have-nots, if they get together, they're going to rise up and they're going to overthrow. Right? So what do the haves do? Well, they get together and they figure out how to keep them divided. Because if you divide, you can conquer. And so I think we got here because every time that we have tried, as you said, with Martin and the Poor People's Campaign, Malcolm when he came back from Africa and did that unity organization, Fred when he did his Rainbow Coalition, right? All three of them got assassinated. Every time they were on the precipice of bringing people together, they got assassinated. That's not a coincidence. I think you have a country that is hell-bent on keeping the haves in power and keeping the haves not divided so they can keep them conquered. And the way that we have been treated in this country, I mean, look, to some degree, I can't blame white folks, right? Because I understand that if it's between being white and being poor, well, there's the old saying, I'd rather be poor and white than to be a nigga, right? That saying kind of has some truth to it, as uncomfortable as that is. I think we're here because one, it's a lot of fear, right? Speaking up is a scary thing, and now we see that again in our times. I think two, we don't want to lose what little bit we have, even though some would argue we have nothing to lose. We don't want to lose that little bit, right? So again, kind of tying into fear. And I think that we have a people in power, whether they're in the government or not, but just people in power who do want to find ways to keep others subjugated and kind of keep, for lack of a better word, just like a de facto slave population. Just because we throw a bunch of pennies at people with minimum wage, which, I mean, we keep fighting these battles over minimum wage to give people livable wages, right? For them and their family. That's mind-boggling. But we throw pennies at them because we have to. But quite honestly, when you think about it, how is that not a slave labor population, right? Who delivers our food? Tell me that's not a slave labor population. Who delivers our fruit? Tell me that's not a slave labor population. I know damn well that these clothes that I'm wearing, that wasn't made by no free person. So we got here because Every single time that we try to unite people and fight for better rights and improve the quality of life for those considered at the bottom of the totem pole, well, we get rid of those people. We destroy them, we kill them, we exile them, we imprison them, and then we find a way to keep the other people uneducated, right? Ignorant of their own history, ignorant of their own power. We keep them divided, we keep them conquered. Right? We got here because it is very, very intentional that we want to remain here. I don't know what else to say to people. We have to realize that we're here by design. Very intentional design.
And Sean, I'm a member of the Black Church, and the Black Church on any given weekend, from the pulpit, we speak about safe communities, safe streets, low crime. We desire that. But I think two things can be true. You can want safety, you can want accountability, but you can also see a need to address the collateral consequences of a conviction and how that plays into a new caste system. You want to amplify that for me?
Oh
The
yeah.
collateral consequences of conviction and how that plays into the new Jim Crow?
Yeah, absolutely. So the collateral consequences are something that we often don't talk about, but something that is so important. All right. The collateral consequences are a barrier to education, a barrier to housing. Hell, you might not even be able to get a car loan, right? Health benefits, right? You can be evicted from your housing community. If you're on public assistance and you got a conviction, you can be evicted, right? It is basically a number of different ways to kind of keep an individual, keep his family, and therefore keep the larger community destabilized. It's hard to build something when you have an unstable or unstable foundation, right? When you look at any house, any building, it has to be stable. That's the first thing that we do. We build the foundation. The government makes it so that when you get a conviction, that there is no foundation from which you can build from. It makes it incredibly hard. And again, that's by design. Because once we label you that, so many doors close in your face. That's why recidivism is 60 something percent, right? Because you don't have any other choice but to return to a life of crime, it seems like. Now, we can say that you don't have to check the box for employment, and you don't. Check me out. I'm an employment attorney. And we can say the same thing for housing. They're not supposed to ask you about your background, but we know things fall through the cracks. You know they ask anyways. We know it's a problem. And so that's just one aspect of it. But I'm going to kick game on another aspect that I think is so important. People don't actually read Brown versus Board of Education, that decision from 54. People should actually read that. It's a quick opinion. But the reason why the justices had a unanimous opinion in overturning segregation wasn't really because there's some noble justices at the time, right? It's a bunch of white men. But it was because of that doll test, right? And what they learned from the doll test by the husband and wife, the Clarks, was how segregation, the effect that it had psychologically and therefore emotionally on people, right? It makes them basically be unable to proverbially pick themselves up by the bootstraps, as America loves to say, and want better for themselves. It makes them feel like they are unworthy of anything better. Well, guess what? When you label someone a convict, you're attaching the weight of that similar stigma onto them. You're making it so that it's impossible, both physically in terms of going places and getting a home loan, getting an education loan, going back to school, getting a job, but also mentally and emotionally, and therefore spiritually, from wanting better for themselves, because it seems like there's no hope. And so I have no doubt that our powers to be in government, not just with this administration, but so many administrations of yesteryear, understand that. They want to keep the body, but break the mind. And they use these new techniques, these new ways about them to do that. The new Jim Crow is finding the different ways in which the old way has evolved. That's really all it is. It has evolved. I think about, it's not just marijuana, right? It is, I mean, let's think about voting. How is that not the new Jim Crow? Right? Literacy tests are out the window, but now it is you can't mail in, right? Now it is, what is it in Georgia? You can't have water in line. How is that not an evolution of what happened before? Right? Now it is you can't count mail-in ballots, even if it's mailed the day of election. It can't count if it doesn't get to the mailing place by 12 o'clock. How is this not an evolution of the ways of yesterday of trying to keep us from voting? How is that not? We're here again. We're here. And when you have those different ways, those different evolved ways of keeping us down, and then you add these different stigmatized labels on us, I think sometimes I'm at a loss of words, because part of me just wants to say, why do we keep trying to make this country live up to the ideals that it profess, that it set forth? Why? We are the true Americans here. We're the only ones that embody the words written into your Declaration of Independence, your constitutions. You guys haven't abided by those words, not a day yet. So yeah, they to kind of tie it in. I know I just went off on a tangent, but like to kind of tie it in, it's like the new Jim Crow is finding these different ways of doing what they did before, whether it's to keep us subjugated, keep us down, or to break our will, to break our spirit, to break our sense of self-worth.
Being a Black-owned business extends so much further than making great products. It's about representing the 8 out of 10 Black businesses that failed within the first 18 months of launch. It's about giving hope to the 4% of startups that are founded by Black women. It's about using our influence to affect change in the communities that look like us, and proving to the next generation that no matter the color of your skin, nothing is impossible.
Sobering. And I wonder if, well, there are two things, Sean. One is that I'm happy you said what you said about DEI and the dog whistles that we hear now, because when I have these conversations, I often wonder what my kids will say years from now.
Yeah.
When they look back and they say, Daddy, what were you doing when this was happening? Were you speaking out? Were you highlighting scholarship that addressed these issues? Were you forcing people to give it some insight and to critically think about where we were? And I want to thank you, Sean, for bringing up, well, it's no longer whistles, right?
Not anymore. Now what you doing?
It's like a trumpet. I mean, folk are saying things they would, you know, even the justification for some of these policies were presented in a way that seemed colorblind and color neutral. But we now know that the collateral effect is that so many Black and brown bodies were shepherded now into systems where there's a permanent label. And you highlighted the incarceration effect. You highlighted the post-release effects with probation, supervision, parole supervision, the ankle monitor, how
If I
it's
could
a
jump in, sorry, one came to mind. Sorry to interrupt. I do apologize, but like the trope of the welfare tree, the welfare queen, right?
Sure.
How that labeling, right? That labeling alone, and it's still here, but it was definitely more rampant or widespread in terms of its use in decades past. But that labeling made it so that whenever you saw a woman, especially a Black woman, who needed help, the way that she was treated and the amount of hoops that she has to jump through in order to find any help in this system, it's just absurd. Mind you, statistics bear it out, but we don't like facts in this country anymore. It is white women that are the biggest beneficiaries of any welfare assistance programs or government funded programs here in this country. And it has been that way for decades and decades, right? So these labels carry such negative weight that it is not just, as I mentioned, the self-worth, although that can be crushing too, how people perceive you, but it's also how people do in fact perceive you and how they then therefore interact with you. That is also equally crushing. And trying to, as a people, lift these incredible boulders off of us. Yeah, it's a lot. And look, I'll kind of paraphrase something that RGB said. She asked, I ask no favors of our brethren. All I ask is that they take their foot off our necks. Well, I'm going to tweak that a bit. We don't ask no favors of our white brothers and sisters. All we ask of our brethren is that they take their knee off our necks. Sorry, I just had to get that in there because that
powerful insight, man. Because
yeah.
Again, oppression is intertwined. So while you and I have spoken about the numbers of people of color who are ushered into this system, we've also, based on the numbers, seen that white people are caught up in it as well. But history has shown us too that they've also been taught or been misled to vote against their own interest when they believe there's a benefit to people of color. That's been throughout history part of the playbook too.
I think sometimes we're not understanding the conversation, and I think that we as a people need to be a little bit more mindful. And I hate to put the onus on us, but we're not in the driver's seat, right? This is chess, not checkers. I think we have to be mindful of that conversation that they are not voting in their interest. Because even I've said that for a long time. But I've been sitting back and peeping game, and I was like, actually, they are voting in their interests. Their interest is white. Their interest is survival. When you're in a caste system and the weight of the system is on your neck, you gonna do whatever you can to survive and get that weight a little bit off your neck. And so again, as we've seen from our government, as we've seen from history, you know what they do to us. Can you always blame white folks for not wanting to side with us and get crushed too? Right? And so if there's some benefit to be had, and we know there are many benefits to be had of being white, I can't blame them when that seems to be in their best interest to choose white. So I think that we need to have a slightly different conversations with our brothers and sisters, because we first have to acknowledge that that is their interest. Their whiteness is a benefit. If I got some benefits, I'm going to be interested in my benefits and keeping my benefits. So before we start talking about this or that, hold up. I want to keep on my benefits. You sound like I might lose some of them benefits.
But let's parallel that with whites in Kentucky, the poorest area, who didn't know that Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act were the same thing when they voted against it.
Yes.
That's just an example of now you have no health care because you just thought it was healthcare provided by the first Black president, so you didn't want it. And then you learn later it was the Affordable Care Act. That's just an example of
Yeah.
the hoodwink.
And there's many, right? That it's not just healthcare. We could talk about basically, look, anything that's going to benefit Black people is going to benefit the majority. Everything, right? So it's healthcare, it is jobs, it is education, right? We can name any aspect of it. Anything that benefits us will benefit them. So yeah, we still have to deal with, and we can't separate the fact that there are biases. There's just plain racism there, right? All of those things definitely play a role. But I think that when we reach across the aisle and try to have a conversation with them, we have to keep in mind where they're coming from, which is, yeah, they might be racist. Yeah, some of them might be biased, right? They got a little prejudice in them, to say the least. But they're thinking white first, and then everything else is secondary. So let's address that elephant in the room. We're immediately trying to get to the point of, but education, see, we both agree on education. Healthcare, see, we agree on education. Folks, I hate to admit it. I know it's exhausting. I know it is. And a lot of folks have a different points of view on how to address this. But at the end of the day, we have a racial issue. We have not finished, we have not resolved that issue. We've been fighting it for quite some time. I'm sorry, unless and until we address that issue, there's always going to be some skepticism from the other side, some lack of trust. Why? Because neither side has fully healed yet. Both sides are hurting. And so if you ever, I've had some pets growing up. I take a dog as an example. If a dog gets something in its paw, you may be trying to help take that thorn out of the dog's paw or a piece of glass out of that dog's paw. But that dog gonna bite you. That dog's gonna growl. Even though you're trying to help that dog gonna bite you. Because it's scared. It's hurt. I'm sorry, brothers and sisters, to compare us all to dogs, but we ain't that far off from our best friends here. Because we still have that very animalistic, instinctual reaction. We are still in pain from what has transpired over the last 400, 500 years. We still don't want to talk about the subject. We still don't want to have any meaningful conversation about it. We don't want to teach about it because it's too painful. It's shameful. It's humiliating. It's frustrating. It's angry. It's all these emotions. I get it. But until we decide to address that elephant in the room that it is racial and stop trying to circumvent that by trying to find this mutual ground that neither side really wants to just go to, I think we're going to constantly be at an impasse. And the reason why I say that, if I may, and I'm sorry to belabor the point, but I think it's an important point. Ladies and gentlemen, I've tried a lot of cases. I've won cases I should have lost cases I should have won as a criminal defense attorney. And then one thing that I learned, and probably was my greatest teacher from all the juries and all the cases I did, was that emotions rule the day. Don't matter how logical you are. Don't matter how reasonable you are. Don't matter, quite frankly, what the law is. And we see that across the board around this country. It's about how they feel about things. So I can sit there and tell a jury, hey, jury, this is a law. My client is innocent, not guilty. Guilty nonetheless, because it's the emotion that they associate with what's being heard and what's being told. Well, that same concept, that same understanding of how important emotions are applied to our discussion that we have across the aisle with one another. We can't just ignore those emotions. And that is what we try to do every time we want to talk about healthcare, every time we want to talk about education. I get it. And we're absolutely right. We ain't saying nothing new. Healthcare has been an issue for 50, 60 years. And they're still not agreeing with us. Supporting public education has been a thing for 50, 60 years. They're still not agreeing with us. No matter what we say and do, they don't agree with us. Case in point, Trump came back into office. So what is it that we need to address? It's their feelings and emotions about this very real racial issue that we have not reckoned with on either side. At some point, we got to have this conversation. We do. So yeah, I'm with you, and I understand the challenges that they vote against their own interests on this side. But we forget that there's an interest here and there's emotions attached to that interest here that is whiteness. And we have to address that first.
Sean, and we'll go through this, man. And I want to thank you again so much for the critical insight you brought to bear. The book is The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. I'm going to post it on the screen. Please add that book to your library. And as I told Sean when we were talking about recording, it's a book I've had to read time and time and time again. I believe Michelle Alexander would have something to say about positive adaptation. I mentioned the Black church, and in her book, she talks about the genesis of the crime bill and how it had support from Black leaders as well as Democratic leaders who were running for office. And to a person, you and I would readily agree that Black folk want the same thing. We want less crime, we want safe communities.
Oh.
I think it's safe to say, though, that we understand, you and I being criminal defense attorneys, that depending on where you live, as some would say, it's not where you're from, it's where you at.
Yeah.
The level of investigation and the level of compassion you'll get from law enforcement based on where you are. The brother in the hood who is drug dealing is going to get more involvement than the kid who is in the Ivy League dorm room marketing the same product.
Yes.
And Michelle talks about the level of positive adaptation Black communities expect, not Black communities generally, but our society expects from young Black kids. But white kids get a pass when they're doing the same thing in the same numbers or even higher numbers. The drug sales, the drug transactions. Could you amplify that for me? The contrast between what Black kids experience in terms of the level of involvement of law enforcement where they are and what white kids get where they are as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's their world. They're in charge. They set the policies, they make the laws. And I think sometimes we're a bit jaded and numb, and we've normalized what has been transpiring in this country for quite some time. But if you need a kind of a refresher, if you will, then look no further than what's happening in Israel and Palestine and how the Israelis are largely treating the Palestinians. Guess where they got the playbook from? Which is ironic because they're doing to the Palestinians what the Germans did to them, and both of them got the playbook from us, right? The experience is night and day, and I can say that both as an attorney, right? So on my professional side, but also as I was a Black kid once, even as a Black man, I know that disparity still exists, right? It doesn't leave just because I left childhood behind. In fact, it still follows me, unfortunately. The experience is night and day. I think one of the great examples is obviously cannabis use, right? Possession is about equal between whites and Blacks. But as we've seen with the war on drugs, great war that was, Blacks were stopped, frisked, incarcerated at disproportionate rates compared to white folks. But we're talking here about the new Jim Crow. I'll give you another example. Because I'm a nerd and I like to do nerdy things when I'm bored, right? I did some research last year on traffic stops. And across the country, Black and brown drivers are being stopped at disproportional rates than white drivers and being ticketed more than white drivers. In New York City, we the liberal bastion that we are, it is no different, right? Black drivers, I believe, are somewhere in the range of like 4 to 5 times more likely to be stopped and pulled over than white drivers. Hispanics are 3 times more likely, right? Black drivers are about 3 times more likely to have their car searched. Hispanic drivers are twice more likely, right? That is an evolution of the old Jim Crow. In the old Jim Crow, we had to have a pass to go here or go there, right? Just like in slave times, we couldn't just roam freely. We didn't have that kind of liberty. Well, guess what? The same thing happens here. The same thing. Our brothers and sisters cannot drive freely or they don't have that liberty to go and come as they please, wherever they please. They are still being monitored. They are still being followed. And if they don't got that pass from massa, well, guess what? That could be the end of their night. And depending on what's in their car, all of a sudden that could be the end of their life. That could be the end of their family, right? The collateral consequences, the ripple effects are just crazy. And this all ties into just the idea that it's the conditioning that starts at a very young age that people are not understanding in this country. We condition Black kids and white kids at a young age, and I should say we understand it, that they're going to have two different experiences. So much so that when these Black kids and white kids grow up and they get into any position, be it at a corporate company, being a police officer, being a doctor, they take that condition and then project onto us what should be. So the cops, because of that condition, grow up and think, the white kid's okay. That's a kid being a kid. Whereas the Black kid, whoa, we got a problem here. That kid is a problem. He's a menace. And the resulting interaction, well, we know what that is. If I may, I'm going to share something with the folks. Brian, you and I were supposed to meet last week, and I had to cancel. Well, I told you offline why we had to cancel. If I may expound upon that, because I think it's kind of poignant. So one of my friends who is a public defender, we had to talk to him about a real situation. Now, things haven't been going well, and that's one of the main reasons why we had to talk to him. But all the things that weren't going well in life kind of came to a head when he had a very unfortunate interaction with the police. He was on the subway coming back home on a Sunday night. We had a couple drinks, and he fell asleep on the train. And he fell asleep, and he was off to the side. And apparently he was taking up 2 seats. So the police, brothers and sisters, Black and brown, they come by knocking, hey, you got to wake up. Okay, cool, not a problem. But because he's asleep, because he's a dark-skinned person, it wasn't, hey, you just got to wake up, which on their body cam, they're showing they're waking other people up. But this dark-skinned brother, they decide, no, you have to come talk to us now and give us information. You were sitting and taking up a seat. That is not a crime. At worst, it's a civil summons, $20. Now he gets brought off the train and he's put against a wall and he's surrounded by 4 or 5 officers. So now that is a seizure. We know that from the 4 levels of DeBoer. That's a level 3 seizure because he took up 2 seats on a train. He refused to give information. Well, they don't have enough information or enough basis to do the seizure. So the fact that they're asking him information and he's refusing was well within his right. But now he's under arrest. Now he's under arrest because he took up 2 seats and he refused to give his name for something that was unauthorized. And then he doesn't want to cooperate. So, that's a little bit of a problem. So he doesn't cooperate and he kind of passively resists. We'll say it that way. So they end up picking him up by each limb, but they have him handcuffed behind his back. Now, this is what becomes a problem because I know that gentleman served our country, actually, right? Served our country. And as they're carrying him by the shoulder, they twist it and you hear him just shriek out, just yell. I will never do it justice. That wasn't a play yell. That was, oh, this hurts. And the response from the lone female officer was, you wouldn't be in pain if you just cooperated. So you mean to tell me you're justifying causing this person, this human being, pain because he refuses to cooperate? Now he's fighting you. He's not punching and kicking you. He just doesn't want to make it easy for you. Okay. But that gives you a right to cause him pain? That person is a public defender, and he is he's in management as a public defender. I can't imagine in my life that would ever happen to a white person. I can't. Not a moment flashes across my mind to think that would ever happen to one of my colleagues who's white. But the cops, the police, through their years of conditioning from little kids to adults, or how they know they should treat black kids versus white kids, how they should treat black boys versus white boys. They thought that they were well within their right to behave this way, with no dignity, no respect for this human being. They think they're justified. So to speak on experience and kind of tie that up, the experience is two different worlds. But every time that we try to cross the line and get our folks to understand on the other side, we get met with a lot of resistance.
Sean, I want you to do this for me if you could, man. Michelle seems to make the argument that legal advocacy or advocates are maybe a cog in the wheel and a larger social movement is needed. I want you to speak on that and also let us know ways we can get in touch with you and all your handles as well.
Cog in the wheel. I respect where she's coming from. I understand where she's coming from. I disagree where she's coming from. I think that there's a book that pops into mind. I know we're talking about Michelle, but there's another book that pops in mind. It's also a movie, The Spook Who Sat by the Door. So while I appreciate Miss Alexander where she's coming from, I think that she should bear in mind that it's not the outside approach, it's not just the inside approach. I think that we have to combine forces, and that's the revolution, right? It is the fact that you have to have agitators on the outside who are willing to disrupt and maybe even set fire to the system, proverbially speaking. But I think that you have to have legal advocates, and I'm going to tie it back to rhetoric, who are skilled enough to be able to communicate to the other side, to speak their language, to push back against them. I mean, one of my heroes, and I imagine yours too, Thurgood Marshall, right? We can argue about whether we are better off today in a desegregated world than where we were before. We can make those arguments. But some brilliant minds, and a lot of brilliant minds came together and decided that this was a good path. This was a path forward. Who am I to sit there and argue with such brilliance? And Thurgood Marshall, through his legal advocacy, and he's not the one. His number two in command, Constance Baker Motley, like she as well. Ruth Bader Ginsburg as well, right? Like legal titans, some of the sharpest minds ever, have been able to push progress forward and improve the quality of life for more people through their legal advocacy. They're not alone, right? There are so many people. Brian Stevenson is another one. He may lose a ton of cases. He's won a ton at the Supreme Court because he has argued some really, really incredibly difficult cases and against some really racist and stubborn people. But even through his legal advocacy, he is able to inspire hope for generations of attorneys to come after him, who then continue the fight that is to change hearts and minds of people. I so disagree because the thing that I love about our profession, what I think is the dopest thing about our profession, is what I led this conversation off with. We get the opportunity to change hearts and minds in a way that no other profession does. Like, people may see your movie, people may read your book. You got to sit in that jury box. You don't get to move. You got jury duty. You got to show up. You got to listen to me speak. Right? And when you think about what we deal at the appeals level, like, that case is there. That case ain't going away. Those justices got to listen to you spit game. You get to write on that. You get to write a brief. You get to do an amicus brief. You get to be the voice of the people. You get to spit fire, son. So how could I ever say that we're just a cog in a wheel? The wheel is still going because of us. The progress that we made is because of us. We're the ones that are able to get progress and move forward. I love our entertainers and what they've done, our athletes, our singers over the years. I love what our politicians have done. Behind every great politician is a lawyer. Who do you think is writing them bills? Politicians talk the talk, but they can't write like that. That's us right there. When you think that there's been laws in place that have been beneficial, who's writing those laws? We are. Who's arguing those laws? We are. You think about advocacy. If it wasn't for great advocates like a Marshall, he doesn't get to be on the Supreme Court, right? If Judge Jackson is not a great advocate, she's not on there, or Kagan, or Sotomayor, right? They're there because they were great advocates as well. And because they were great advocates, they got elevated to those positions. This is the dopest profession. It is hard. It is frustrating. It is so many things. But dope is the first thing and the last thing that I will always say about this profession, because we have such a unique power. And guess what? While we still have even a resemblance of a democracy, that means we have a resemblance of a chance to still fight. I think about all the cases that are in the court right now that are challenging the Trump administration. That's legal advocacy. Oh, bet you think you could do this? You think you can do that? Bet we're going to take you to court. Argue that. How many legal advocates have shut down the Justice Department, gotten cases thrown out, protected the First Amendment, protected the Fourth Amendment, protect the separation of the branches? Like, that's all legal advocacy. The next time you feel that you've been aggrieved, the system don't work for you, whether you're in school, you're in the healthcare that has denied you coverage, who are you going to? You can't call 911 for that. We get 911. There's a reason why they did not want us to become lawyers. Like, that's just, it's dope. The power of rhetoric. That's when we talk about these speakers and why they got killed, is because they can speak. We have the ability to write and change minds and to speak and change minds. And they can't take it away from us. Like, this is the dopest profession for sure.
Powerful, Sean. Sean, you've just convinced scores of people to consider law school, man. I mean, I wanted to ask you initially, man, if you could say something to your 16-year-old self prior to applying, whether you do it again, but it sounds like you're in a place now where that's the best decision you've ever made.
Hell yeah, because I knew it was. I knew it was then. The power that we have, I don't take for granted. I consider it a true honor. But the power that we have in terms of being able to persuade people, it is a power. I don't take it for granted. You should use it wisely and use it for the benefit and good of yourself, but also, more importantly, everybody else, right? To push us forward as society. But the powerful persuasion it's everything.
Powerful, man. Bro, please give your handles, ways people can get in touch with you. I mentioned to listeners and viewers, Sean Farrow is an employment, education, and criminal attorney. Please, Sean, share ways people can get in touch with you.
Definitely. People can always reach out to me. The Farrow Firm, you can reach out to me via email, sean@thefarrowfirm.com. You can also message me on IG and TikTok, the Farrow Firm. That's my handle. So you can always reach out to me. I'm always available, and we're always trying to help people. So holla at me.
Bro, I appreciate you so much, man. Thanks for coming on and thanks for sharing. I'm going to check out The Spook Who Sat by the Door. It's a book I probably looked at in college, but college was so many years ago. I need to do a reread of that as well, man. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight on The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. It's a book I think it's worth reading, and it's good to discuss because so many of the themes are important and compelling. Yeah. Sean, thank you so much again, my brother, for joining me as a guest on the What a Word podcast.
Thank you.